Imagine waiting 50 years for someone. 50 years of empty chairs at dinner tables, of holidays alone, of watching everyone around you build families while you hold on to a memory. Now imagine finally getting that phone call, that letter, that moment you've been praying for since you were 17 years old. Your heart races, your hands shake. You can barely breathe because after half a century of silence, he's finally coming back. You buy the dress, you book the church, you tell everyone that miracles do happen. But then, on the morning of your wedding, you open an envelope and read 3 words that shatter everything. He's not coming. What would you do? How would you survive that kind of heartbreak twice in one lifetime? In the summer of 1969, while America was landing on the moon and Woodstock was defining a generation, a 17-year-old girl named Evelyn Grace was falling in love for the first time in a small coastal town called Maple Harbor. She had sun-kissed shoulders from working at her father's ice cream shop on the boardwalk, bare feet that knew every inch of sandy pavement, and a laugh that made the summer feel longer than it was. Thomas Hale was 19, tall and lean with carpenter's hands, working maintenance at the old lighthouse that stood at the edge of the pier. He wasn't flashy or particularly talkative, but when he looked at Evelyn, it was like watching someone recognize home for the first time. They met on a Tuesday in June when she brought him a strawberry cone that was melting faster than she could walk. He smiled, took it from her, and said something she'd remember for the rest of her life. You know what's funny? I've been coming to this pier every day for 3 months, and I never really saw it until right now. She didn't understand what he meant at first. But then he looked at her again, and she did. They spent that entire summer together, sitting on the rocks beneath the lighthouse, talking about dreams that felt too big for a town like Maple Harbor. Thomas wanted to build houses one day, real homes where families could grow old. Evelyn wanted to travel, maybe teach, definitely write. They made plans the way young people do, as if time was something they'd always have enough of. But in August, Thomas received a letter that changed everything. He'd been drafted. Vietnam. He had 2 weeks before he had to report. Evelyn cried so hard the night he told her that she thought she might actually break in half. He held her on the dock while the ocean crashed beneath them, and he made her a promise. I'm coming back, Evie. I swear to you. Wait for me until the lilacs bloom again. That's when I'll find you. She kissed him, tasted the salt from both their tears, and whispered, I'll wait forever if I have to. 2 weeks later, she watched him board a bus headed for boot camp. He turned back one last time, waved, and then he was gone. For the first few months, letters came regularly. He wrote about the heat, the fear, the guys in his unit who became like brothers. She wrote back about the town, the lighthouse, the way the lilacs were already starting to bud even though it was only March. But then, in the spring of 1970, the letters stopped. At first, Evelyn told herself it was just delayed mail, that the war was chaotic and things got lost. But weeks turned into months, and months turned into a silence so heavy it felt like drowning. Her mother gently suggested she start going out with other boys. Her father said Thomas probably met someone else, that war changes people. But Evelyn couldn't let go. Every spring, when the lilacs bloomed, she went to the pier and waited. She'd sit on the same bench, wearing the same perfume she wore that last night, holding onto a hope that made less sense with every passing year. Friends got married, had children, built lives. Evelyn worked at the library, took care of her aging parents, and became the woman people whispered about with pity. Poor Evelyn, still waiting for a ghost. But she didn't care, because some kinds of love don't die just because time passes. They just learn to live in a different part of your heart, quiet and patient, like seeds waiting for spring. Before we go deeper into Evelyn's story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. By 2019, Evelyn was 67 years old. Her hair had gone silver. Her hands had the kind of softness that comes from a lifetime of books and gentle work. And her heart had learned to carry its grief the way old trees carry storms. She still lived in Maple Harbor, in the same house she grew up in, now filled with the kind of quiet that only belongs to people who've spent decades alone. She volunteered at the senior center, grew tomatoes in her backyard, and every Sunday, she walked to the pier. Not to wait anymore, just to remember. Her niece, a bright 23-year-old named Clara, visited often and worried constantly. "Aunt Evie, you have to let yourself live. He's not coming back." Evelyn would smile, pour more tea, and say, "I know, sweetheart, but I'm not waiting anymore. I'm just remembering. There's a difference." Then, on a cold morning in early November, something impossible happened. Evelyn walked to her mailbox, expecting the usual bills and grocery store flyers, and found a handwritten letter with no return address. The handwriting was shaky, but unmistakable. Her knees nearly gave out. She sat down right there on the porch steps, hands trembling so badly she could barely open the envelope. Inside, on a single piece of lined paper, were words that made the world stop spinning. "My dearest Evelyn, I never stopped loving you. I never stopped trying to come home. If you'll still have me, meet me at St. Mary's Church on the first Sunday of December. Let's finish what time began. Forever yours, Thomas." Evelyn read it 5 times before she believed it was real. Then she cried. Not the quiet tears she'd grown used to, but the kind of sobbing that comes from 50 years of grief finally breaking open into hope. She called Clara, who drove over immediately and held her while she shook. "He's alive, Clara. He's alive, and he wants to marry me." The news spread through Maple Harbor like wildfire. The local newspaper wanted to cover it. The bakery offered to make the cake for free. The florist insisted on donating the flowers. Everyone wanted to be part of the miracle, the love story that refused to die even after half a century of silence. Evelyn tried to stay grounded, but inside, she felt 17 again. She bought a simple white dress, not a traditional wedding gown, but something elegant and age-appropriate. She had her hair done. She chose lilacs for her bouquet, of course. And every night, she'd sit by the window and think about what she'd say to him when she finally saw his face again. Would he still look the same? Would they still fit together the way they used to? Did it even matter? She didn't need him to be the boy from the lighthouse anymore. She just needed him to be there. As the days counted down, Evelyn barely slept. She replayed every memory, every letter, every promise. She wondered what his life had been like, why it took so long, what kept him away. But none of it mattered as much as the fact that he was coming back. On the night before the wedding, Clara stayed over. They sat in the kitchen drinking chamomile tea, and Clara asked the question everyone was thinking. "Aunt Evie, are you scared?" Evelyn thought for a long moment, then smiled. "Terrified. But I've been scared for 50 years. At least now I'm scared and hopeful at the same time." Sunday morning came with gray skies and the smell of rain. Evelyn woke up at dawn, too nervous to eat, too excited to sit still. She put on her dress, pinned a single lilac to her hair, and looked at herself in the mirror. She barely recognized the woman staring back, not because she looked old, but because she looked alive in a way she hadn't in decades. Clara drove her to St. Mary's Church, a small chapel near the edge of town, where the stained glass windows caught the morning light just right. People were already gathered outside, neighbors and strangers alike, all waiting to witness what they were calling the wedding that time forgot. Evelyn walked inside, her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone could hear it. The church smelled like wood polish and candle wax. Soft music played from an old organ in the corner. She stood at the back, clutching her bouquet, waiting for the doors to open and for Thomas to walk through. But then, just as the music swelled, a young man approached her. He was maybe in his mid-40s, with kind eyes and an envelope in his hand. "Mrs. Grace?" Evelyn's smile faltered. "Yes?" He hesitated, glancing at the envelope like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "My name is Daniel Hale. Thomas was my brother." The world tilted. Evelyn heard the words, but they didn't make sense. Was, not is, was. "I'm so sorry," Daniel continued, his voice breaking. "He asked me to give you this." He handed her the envelope and stepped back. Evelyn's hands shook so violently she almost dropped it. The church had gone silent. Even the music had stopped. She opened the envelope and pulled out a letter, written in the same shaky handwriting as before. "My sweet Evelyn, I tried to reach you, but time was unkind. My health is fading, and I don't want you to see me this way. I asked my brother to bring you this, my last gift. Inside, you'll find the ring I kept all these years. It was meant for you, and no one else. I loved you every single day of my life. I never stopped. But I can't come to you now. Not like this. I'm sorry, Evie. I'm so sorry. Wait for me one more time, will you? Just a little while longer. I'll find you when the lilacs bloom again. Forever yours, Thomas." The bouquet slipped from Evelyn's hands and hit the floor with a soft thud. Someone gasped. Clara rushed forward, but Evelyn didn't move. She just stood there, staring at the letter, reading it over and over as if the words might change. He wasn't coming. He was dying. Or maybe already gone. 50 years of waiting, and it ended like this. Not with a reunion, but with another goodbye. After the church cleared out, after the whispers faded and the well-meaning hands stopped reaching for her, Evelyn sat alone in the front pew. Daniel Hale sat beside her, quiet and respectful, waiting for her to speak first. Finally, she did. "Where is he?" Daniel took a deep breath. "He's in a hospice facility about 2 hours north of here. Stage 4 lung cancer. He's been sick for a while." Evelyn closed her eyes. "Why didn't he tell me sooner?" Daniel's voice was gentle. "Because he didn't know how to, and because he only found you 6 months ago." Evelyn looked at him, confused. "What do you mean, found me?" Daniel pulled out a small notebook from his jacket pocket and handed it to her. Inside were pages and pages of notes, addresses, phone numbers, all crossed out. After the war, Thomas came home different. He had injuries, trauma, nightmares. He tried to find you, but your family had moved. The ice cream shop was gone. No one knew where you were. He searched for years, Evelyn. But back then, without the internet, without social media, people just vanished. Evelyn's throat tightened. I never left Maple Harbor. Daniel nodded. I know, but your parents did. They moved to Florida in the mid-70s, right? Thomas went to your old address and found strangers. He tried the church, the library, even the lighthouse, but no one could tell him where you'd gone. Evelyn felt the weight of it all crashing down. 50 years of waiting, and they'd both been looking. They'd both been alone. He gave up eventually, Daniel continued. Got married, had kids, tried to build a life, but he never stopped thinking about you. When his wife passed away 5 years ago, he started looking again. And this time, he found you. Evelyn's voice was barely a whisper. How? Daniel smiled sadly. Clara, your niece, she posted a photo of you on social media last spring, tagged Maple Harbor. Thomas's daughter saw it, showed it to him, and he knew. He said he'd recognize your smile anywhere. Even 50 years later. Evelyn started to cry, not loud. Just silent tears that rolled down her cheeks and onto the letter still clutched in her hands. He wrote to you as soon as he could, Daniel said. But by then, he was already sick. He wanted to see you one more time, wanted to marry you the way he promised. But the treatments weren't working. He's barely conscious most days now. Evelyn looked up, her eyes red but fierce. Take me to him. They drove through rain and fog, 2 hours that felt like 2 years. Evelyn sat in the passenger seat, holding the ring Thomas had sent her. It was simple, a thin gold band with a small stone, worn and tarnished but still whole. When they arrived at the hospice, the nurse at the front desk looked at Evelyn with something close to reverence. You're Evelyn, she said softly. He talks about you all the time. Evelyn's heart broke a little more. Daniel led her down a quiet hallway to a small room at the end. Inside, lying in a bed surrounded by machines and monitors, was Thomas Hale. He was thin, almost fragile, his skin pale and his breathing labored. But when Evelyn stepped into the room, his eyes opened. And for just a moment, she saw the boy from the lighthouse. She moved to his side, tears streaming down her face, and took his hand. Hi, Tommy. His lips curved into the faintest smile. Evie. His voice was barely there, but it was his. She sat down beside him, holding his hand like she'd never let go. I'm here. I'm finally here. He squeezed her hand, weak but deliberate. You waited. She laughed through her tears. Of course I did. I promised, didn't I? They sat like that for hours, not talking much, just being. She told him about the library, the tomatoes, the pier. He listened, his eyes never leaving her face. At one point he whispered, I'm sorry I couldn't make it to the church. Evelyn shook her head. You made it to me. That's all that matters. As the sun set outside the window, casting the room in soft orange light, Thomas reached for something on the table beside him. Daniel helped him, placing a small folded piece of paper in his hand. Thomas gave it to Evelyn. She opened it carefully. It read, When the lilacs bloom again, that's where I'll be. Evelyn looked at him, confused. He smiled, closed his eyes, and whispered, "Every spring, Evie. I'll be there." 3 days later, Thomas Hale passed away peacefully in his sleep. Evelyn was there, holding his hand. Evelyn didn't fall apart the way people expected. She grieved, yes, but quietly. The way someone grieves when they've already spent a lifetime preparing for loss. She returned to Maple Harbor, to her small house and her quiet routines. But something had changed. She no longer felt like she was waiting. She felt like she'd finally arrived. Every spring, when the lilacs bloomed, she visited the pier. Sometimes Clara came with her. Sometimes she went alone. She'd sit on the bench, close her eyes, and feel the wind on her face. And every single time, without fail, the air smelled like lilacs, even when there were none nearby. Clara asked her once, a few years later, if she regretted waiting. Evelyn thought about it for a long time, then smiled. No, because the waiting wasn't wasted. It was proof. Proof that love doesn't need to be returned to be real. It just needs to be felt. When Evelyn passed away at the age of 88, surrounded by family and the scent of fresh lilacs, Clara found her journal on the nightstand. On the last page, in Evelyn's careful handwriting, were these words: "I waited 50 years for him, but maybe the waiting was the love story. And in the end, we got our wedding after all. Just not the one I imagined. But it was ours, and that's enough." So let me ask you something. If you knew that waiting for someone meant 50 years of loneliness, 50 years of questions, 50 years of wondering if they'd ever come back, would you still do it? Or would you choose to move on, to protect your heart, to build a life with someone else? There's no right answer. But Evelyn Grace chose to wait. And in doing so, she taught us that love isn't always about the reunion. Sometimes it's about the faithfulness, the refusal to let go, even when letting go would be easier. What do you think? Could you have done what Evelyn did? And more importantly, would you want to? Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. And if this story moved you, if it made you believe that love can survive anything, even time itself, type "I still believe in love" in the comments. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Because in a world that tells us to move fast and forget faster, maybe we need more people like Evelyn Grace. People who wait. People who remember. People who prove that some promises are worth keeping, no matter how long it takes.
Don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more stories. Also download your free ebook titled How to Rediscover Yourself and Reclaim Your Life After 40s by clicking the link in the pinned comment. Thank you.